clearly more than forming a rational understanding of the universe. There's more to life than that. I mean, there's fun, there's love. So I'm not saying that reason is everything, but the question is, do you ever have to be irrational to go beyond merely conceptually understanding? My concern with religious fundamentalism, and not all religions equally, but my concern is that these are the beliefs that are held most closely. They're the least negotiable. I mean, they're by definition non-negotiable. These are my faith-based beliefs are the beliefs that if you challenge them, that will by whatever evidence or whatever argument, I will take that as a personal insult.
Like, how does your personal spirituality serve you ethically, and where does that intersect with beyond tolerance? Because tolerance suggests that there's something to tolerate. Where does it lead you to compassion and love, and what solutions do you think can be derived from your personal experiences of mysticism and spirituality?
The reason why I have such passion for criticizing this particular species of bad ideas, the religious ones, is because I see the baby in the bathwater that everyone is afraid of losing, and I see that it doesn't require any divisive bullshit to be saved, right? You don't have to lie to yourself. You don't have to believe that a book was written by the creator of the universe. You don't have to believe that hellfire awaits people who don't call a historical person by the right name. You don't have to believe any of those things.
Are you confident that individual consciousness, like my individual Russell Brand consciousness and your individual Sam Harris consciousness, are distinct, separate things that are not qualitatively similar, if not ultimately the same?
Now, we don't know how consciousness arises in the physics of things. We don't know if it's a product of
matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly good reason to believe that it is, but we don't know how far down it goes. It could be a fundamental constituent of matter, or it could arise on the basis of assemblies of neurons.
Is the good reason to believe that it comes from matter, that the more complex an organism is, the more evidence of functioning rational consciousness there is?
Again, we simply don't know at what point consciousness emerges, but it's possible that single cells are conscious in some way, right? I mean,
Yes.
You wouldn't expect the living world to appear differently if cells were conscious, right? But it would be genuinely mysterious, because when you look at the human brain, there seems to be a lot of neural activity, in fact, most neural activity, that is not associated with what you experience as consciousness, or I experience as consciousness from a first-person side. So,
most neural activity is not related to what we experience as consciousness, so it's most anatomical, biological stuff.
Yeah, I mean, most of what your brain is doing isn't showing up in your first-person experience as consciousness.
My individual identity is just like a cherry on the cake, while the kidneys and the blood,
it's the only thing that ultimately matters, right? I mean, it's a and it's the only thing that any of us can be absolutely sure of. And so this is my line about consciousness being the only thing in the universe that can't be an illusion. I'm not the first person to say this, obviously, but it's the only thing that has to be true of us, no matter how mistaken we might be about everything else. So if we're in the Matrix right now, and this is just we're just living in the simulation on some alien supercomputer, and none of what we think is real is actually real, consciousness is still real. I mean, consciousness is just simply the fact that anything seems to be happening at all.
Do you not find connections between what you have learned in neuroscience and what you have learned from studying sort of Buddhism?
Oh, yeah. The connections are very direct. The central claim of Buddhism is not just Buddhism, but Buddhism, and I would put several of the Indian traditions like Advaita Vedanta in there, with the central claim is that the self is an illusion. The ego is an illusion. And when I say self, I don't mean that people are illusions. I mean that the sense that you have a subject riding around in your head thinking your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That there's a thinker in addition to the thoughts. That's an illusion.
Yes.
And that makes perfect sense neurologically, because there's no place in the brain for your ego to be sitting. There's no central place where everything comes together. There's no unchanging center in the brain. You're just talking about a cascade of neurophysiology, and everything is distributed everywhere. And it's not and there are various parts of the brain that are coming online and off and subserving conscious states, and not. It's a process. And there if you could experience consciousness as a flow of sensory and emotional and interoceptive experience without the sense that there's an unchanging center riding around on that flow, right? Like a man in a boat on the stream of consciousness.
Yes, yes.
If you could experience that consciousness without that, that would be an experience that is much more coincident with what we understand neurologically. That would be to experience something that is more true from the third person brain based what do we see inside the head side. And it just so happens you can experience that. That is what meditation is like when you really know how to meditate. This sense that there's a meditator in the head strategically paying attention to experience rather than just pure experience, that drops away, right? So that's one piece of data in favor of introspection here.
So Sam Harris, the other thing is when you've taken psychedelics, did you not experience things that are comparable to what you described is neurologically demonstrable and what you've experienced in meditation? A sense that your individual identity is a sort of a confection of sort of ideas and sensation, and that there is a sort of a beautiful oneness.
Consciousness is the knowing aspect of experience. And in the normal course of events, you have ordinary sights and sounds and smells and sensations and thoughts and emotions, and most people go through life thinking every moment of the day in that context. They don't know how to meditate. They don't have any mindfulness. They have this sort of white noise of discursivity, where they're talking to themselves, and everything they see and sense and every interaction is filtered through this conversation they're having with themselves, and the world they see visually and the world they sense with touch and other senses is tiled over with concepts. So I look at a bottle and I see bottle, right? This field of light and shadow and color is differentiated by concepts. I see my phone, I see a bottle, I see the table, and everything is solidified that way. Now, what happens with psychedelics is your habit pattern of thought and attention is completely bowled over by the pharmacology of whatever you've just ingested, right? So if it's acid or mushrooms or any of those classic psychedelics, now you can have all of those changes happen in your consciousness. Like the full pyrotechnics of a psychedelic display, without losing the sense of an ego. You can actually you can still feel that you are the center of that, and it's just so much better, or in the chaotic psychotic side, so much worse to be you at that moment. Now, for me, meditation has a very if you go on intensive retreat and you're spending 12 to 18 hours a day meditating, you can have psychedelic-like changes in the contents of consciousness. But the more important change for me is the insight that there is no center to consciousness, that there simply is consciousness and everything appearing. And when you have that insight, it actually doesn't matter what is appearing. It doesn't matter if when you touch the tree, it feels like a million watts of sublime energy, and there's no barrier between you and the tree. That is the same on some fundamental level. That's the same as just seeing a water bottle and picking it up and having a drink in a completely otherwise ordinary state of consciousness. The center can drop out equally or be present equally in both of those cases. And I'm much more interested in finding this unifying experience of centerlessness in the midst of whatever is happening.